Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building brands, businesses, and a career you love with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome, business builder, to another story of creating a business you love and all the crazy shit that happens when you do. There are naturally so many ways to start a business and so many avenues you can take. You may have a desire to leverage a core skill and make your own unique business that can exist in a field that's fairly simple to understand and explain, something that makes sense in 1.5 seconds, but is still unique to you. Then there's the other types, the businesses that merge a group of your passions or skills to make something new. It's these businesses that tend to go through multiple iterations, reinventions, rebrands. These are the ones that are harder to put in an Instagram bio or a LinkedIn bio, the ones that tap into a cultural need that only you can create as your unique self. And it's these ones that keep my brain turning over and over in the very best of ways. My guest today has done just that. Tom Maynard and his co-founder have built a business off an opportunity that didn't quite exist yet, leveraging the creator economy into a unique media business. In the sharing of his business building story, the story of Amplify, Tom and I chat about understanding the power of audience and influence and trusting that where there's an engaged community, money flows. The changed landscape of media, the challenge of scaling up and being responsible for people's careers while also being responsible for your own business growth, making costly mistakes and the education it gives you, and why, when you're ahead of the market, you just need to keep knocking on doors. We also spend some time talking about some of my own favorite topics, like why brands and media businesses need to take a risk on the content they create and not be afraid to get noticed. It is really just the only option in an absolute sea of content. The recognition that creators are in fact media businesses, whether they have 1,000 followers or millions, and why cultural shifts matter to all businesses. This chat is a reminder that you should always follow your instincts in business and not be afraid to try something new. Let's get into it. I'm here with Tom Maynard, co-founder of Amplify, Asia Pacific's leader in youth-focused content production, talent management, and youth events. Since its inception, Amplify has worked with some of the most followed YouTubers, TikTokers, and influencers in Australia and Asia, including Troye Sivan and Georgia Productions, while creating incredible productions like Undiscovered, the world's first music reality show made for TikTok, the first scripted drama on TikTok called Love Songs, 5 Spotify original podcasts, including the longest-running Spotify original podcast in Australia, Gee Thanks, and so much more. All while helping connect brands like Canva, Menulog, Samsung, Twitter, and Intel with millions of engaged young people around the world. So not much. Tom thrives on creating and growing brands into something meaningful and financially successful, applying both his technical and creative mindset to some of the world's most influential brands, all while leading a team of creatives, creators, and thought leaders that are one step ahead of the cultural pulse. What a world to play in. Tom, I can't wait to hear your story of building this incredible business. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. That's an amazing intro. Very, very kind of you.
You're very welcome. And what an amazing setup you have there. I've got to love a professional production.
We just dumped a whole lot of money on this studio here, so hopefully it pays off.
It is looking well worth it. And before we get into the nitty-gritty stuff, Tom, I got a pretty simple one for you. How would your best mate describe you?
Scattered. Probably all over the place, running 1,000,000 miles an hour, I think, is often how I feel. And most of my friends have no idea what I do.
Oh, I feel that very deeply. A fellow 15 tabs open at any given time, half-done tasks, I'm imagining, all over the place.
Exactly.
So before the world of new media, before creators, who were you?
Well, obviously, starting way back at the beginning, people say they're a child of the internet. I really was around when the internet was first starting to boom. So back in high school, I always kind of knew I wanted to be involved in the internet. And that was like in the 90s when there was 14.4 or 28.8 dial-up modems trying to get surfing the information superhighway. And I was totally addicted when I first started getting involved in computers and media and technology. And I guess I always knew I wanted to be involved with like the internet and entertainment in some way, shape, or form. And I always feel like I'm kind of early to things, and I was probably way too early in a lot of ways to that world, but it was definitely something I spent way too much time on when I was a kid, playing around with computers, playing around with like nonlinear editing when I was 15, 16 years old. But yeah, the university degree or the businesses didn't really exist then. So I kind of moved into my first job was actually like tech support for Optus Internet. And I always somehow just make up my own jobs or my own departments when I get a job somewhere. So for Optus Internet, or Microplex as it was back then, I was a tech support, but I created a unit just to support all Apple computers. And then I kind of moved into web development, web design, then kind of got this really good opportunity when Big Brother launched to work on the digital side of Big Brother, built with some amazing, talented people, both producers and technologists. I guess a precursor to what multimedia is in a lot of ways. There was like subscription live streaming, video content on demand. It really was a multimedia powerhouse when Big Brother launched and when it was in its heyday throughout the 2000s. So that's really where I guess I learned a lot, and the power of audience and the power of influence. And like from there, stayed in that kind of TV world and that production world, and worked for various production companies and worked on Big Brother's Master Chefs in Australia and the UK, and then kind of headed up the digital departments for businesses like that. And then I guess when I kind of saw the first magic of creators and influencers was when YouTube really launched in like 2008, 2009. And some creators have popped up that had access to an audience of millions of subscribers. So it was really fascinating. And the whole middleman of, as you know, from your background and in media, there's usually a gatekeeper. You know, there's a radio executive that's going to give you a show, or a television executive that's going to give you a show, or a newspaper editor that's going to give you an article. But all of that had kind of broken down, and the creator had complete access to their audience generally. And so that happened in 2008, 2009, moved out to the US and with a production company in 2011 to do a bunch of initiatives with YouTube. And that kind of blew my mind. And it was when like YouTube really was exploding. All these amazing businesses started around the creator economy. And then, you know, had a second child on the way, not a quarter life crisis, but some kind of emotional crisis, whereas I don't want to be stuck in a job anymore and like reach middle age and go, what am I doing? I wanted to kind of be the master of my own destiny. And for better or worse, I had a second kid on the way and go, okay, it's now or never, come back to Australia and take what I've learned in the US and bring it back to Australia. And that was like in 2014, 2015. And since then, I had a few kind of changes, but we were definitely very early. Thought I, came back to Australia thinking I was Billy Big Balls and I knew everything about digital. But like Australia is such a small and hard market for media and entertainment, and a competitive market, and also a very much risk averse market. So there's definitely been a lot of years of heartache and struggle. But now, fast forward 5-10 years, the industry is keeping up, and definitely think things are moving in the right direction now.
Yeah. Wow. What an incredible background to be working on, first of all, some of those shows and seeing some of this start to come to life. I love that you touch on the ability that creators have to be the master of their own domain, not waiting to be plucked by a publishing house or a network or, an individual within these organizations to be able to go, nah, here I am one login away from reaching and sharing my message with a significant audience. If only I've got the guts to do it. And I love that you saw that and were able to lean into that a little bit to create this incredible business. Obviously, it's an economy that's very close to my heart, being independent gal in the media arena now. And I just think that's brilliant to get started. Can imagine it'd be pretty scary being the forefront of this, and then Amplify as an idea starts to seed. Where did you start in making Amplify real and taking it to market?
It's kind of gone through a few different changes. So I did have a previous business prior to this, which, I screwed up on, to be honest. I made a lot of like bad, poor financial mistakes. And that was like when I first came back to Australia in 2015. So that was the kind of definitely the very expensive MBA doing that business. And I guess from there, though, the real change of our business and starting Amplify was probably like in 2018, 2019, when myself and my now co-founder and business partner, Alex, we were running two businesses independently, probably not very successfully, each of us. And, at the start of COVID, I lost like all these deals that just totally were train wrecked and abolished, and millions of dollars of potential deals were kind of lost. So we decided in 2019, let's just do everything together. He had a talent management business. I had a more production-based business. And we've worked together on various projects here and there. And we just decided to smash everything together and partner on building a business called Amplify. And I think since COVID, it's just accelerated everything and create a pretty meaningful business. And there's like three different parts. We kind of bill ourselves as a creator-led entertainment business. And there's three core parts to that, and that is production, where we're doing everything from podcasting to managing social accounts for brands to large scale content initiatives for SVODs, the Disney Pluses and Netflixes of the world, hopefully. And then manage talent, so manage a huge amount of Australia's biggest creators, and then also campaigns, so working with brands to create campaigns if they want to market a product or service to an audience.
Incredible. I have so many questions for you. The first thing I want to start with is why the focus on youth and the events and things that you can make in that space? What drew you to that? What the kind of energy do you get from that?
I think the youth really control the internet, and they really like dictate where things are going. And I think like the power that they have, they're always the loudest, they're always the most passionate. It's like, and we always joke, like, if we can bottle up that energy that a 15, 16-year-old fangirl or fanboy has, it's so freaking powerful and can move markets, it can move products, it can move tickets, it can move merchandise. And also, like, they've got the most free time. And so they're discovering platforms like TikTok. It was kind of a joke 3 or 4 years ago when it was a previous app called Musical.ly, and it was all like 12, 13-year-olds on it. And so everybody was really dismissive of Musical.ly. But, you fast forward 4 or 5 years now, TikTok is everything in youth culture. So I think they really dictate the rise of platforms, the rise of spending power. And there's just an energy and a hope around youth that is really exciting. It's always changing, and it's always moving in a different direction, always looking to the future, always looking for solutions. So it keeps us on our toes, and I can be a really embarrassing dad to my kids.
I'm sure they think you're very cool. If they don't yet, I'm sure they will on reflection later on. Take me back to your co-founder and you having these conversations. You're like, wicked, we're going to put this all together. This makes perfect sense, which it absolutely does. How did you approach defining your offering to the market and taking it out there and finding clients to buy into your offering?
We always had a gut feeling. Like, we're quite data driven, but we feel like we have a very good gut feeling of where things are going, where audiences are going, and where content is going. So we work really, really closely with brands, but we also kind of connect them to the audiences. But like, if we rewind back to 2019 or so, when we kind of first started on this Amplify adventure, I guess where the opportunity lies, like, more and more people are watching content, consuming content on their phones, but that's kind of like the leader for us. And like the amount of time people are spending on TikTok and social and YouTube, we always knew there's a huge opportunity. Australia is just a little bit behind of where things are going. When you look at how much time kids are actually spending on TikTok, I think it's like they're opening the app 8 times a day, watching 90 minutes of content a day, which is like, a feature film essentially. So they're watching a feature film's worth of content every day on TikTok. So we're always really, really big believers service, but I don't think the market was necessarily there when we first started. So I guess back then the opportunity was really, okay, let's just invest. We know these guys, these creators that we work with every day have big audiences and really big fandoms and communities around them. So that's really the first aspect that we focus on, trying to look to work with creators that are building and producing content that has a certain depth to it, but also like there's a community around that content too. So where we see from a market perspective is we focus on the creator, see where the creators are pushing things, and then the market and the sales and the commercial side will generally follow that. I hate using this term, but like where eyeballs go, money flows is the term we use. So where the audience shifts to, we kind of follow too.
Amazing. How was your first big win?
First big win, I think for us, I did a tour back in 2015, 2016. I had no idea about touring whatsoever, but we had this opportunity with a guy called Troye Sivan. So an agent that we used to work with, managed him from an acting perspective. He had a massive YouTube channel. And I just got back from America at that stage, and we knew that there were these huge YouTubers out in America and the UK, but they never really come to Australia before. So we built this tour and brought these YouTubers out from America. These are kind of like old school OG YouTube names like Troye Sivan, Tyler Oakley, Connor Franta, Keen and JC, etc. So we brought them to a tour across Australia, New Zealand, and it was a huge, huge success. There were teenagers running. It was like One Direction at that time in terms of the power and the fandom that they had around them. And that was really the light bulb moment for, okay, there's a genuine community here. People want to see, and people are prepared to pay money to have a meet and greet or buy their merchandise. And it's something that mainstream media have absolutely no idea about and couldn't give two shits about either. And I think that's also, just going back to your previous point, is another reason why we really like to focus on that demographic. So the large scale media entities, the Nines, the Sevens, the News Limiteds, they might give lip service, say they care about their audience, but they don't really care about their audience. They don't really understand that audience at all. But the power that they actually have is incredible. So that's, I guess, another reason why we focus on that audience, because we have a deeper understanding of their needs, what they care about, etc. But sorry, and then going back to that tour and that event, that really was the light bulb moment that set everything off for us and gave me the kind of information and the understanding that, hey, there's actually an opportunity in this creator space. And since then, that creator world, the platforms have just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and have more power.
How do you make sure that when a client is thinking, okay, I've got to hit a youth market here, I've got to hit an audience, I need something, how do you make sure that you're top of mind in those boardrooms, in those conversations?
Oh, we could be doing a hell of a lot better.
Said every business builder and owner ever.
We're constantly bashing down doors. We're constantly trying to talk to media buyers, media companies, and give them the numbers that these guys reach. Like, for instance, a lot of our creators now. So one creator called Kat Clark that we work with quite heavily and we manage, her audience is like 80% Australian or 70% Australian. Every video that she posts is 1 million plus views. And you take that kind of information and data and you present that to a 7, 9 or 10, and they're struggling to reach 300,000-400,000 people per night now. We look at creators not necessarily as just doing one-off talent deals, etc., but they're media businesses unto themselves, and they're almost like the new mastheads, right? They are media businesses, and like their brand and their personality is in the center and the heartbeat of that. But they can do everything from live events to merchandise and products to brand deals to podcasts to having a long form TV show, you name it. Like, these guys are the new media businesses, and they have more power, more sway, and a deeper connection to an Australian audience and to a global audience too. So it's super, super exciting, but it's constantly talking to the media agencies and the media partners about the power that these creators actually have.
It must be really hard some days to fight against those brick walls all the time and be like, you're going to need this. You're going to love this. You just have got to open your thinking a little bit now and invest.
Yeah, it was. And I was way too early in a lot of ways in this space. It's getting a lot easier now. The people that are in charge, like there's a new guard in charge in a lot of these media businesses and media companies. They do honestly get it a lot more than they used to 5 or 10 years ago, for sure. So that education is definitely getting easier, but I think like at the top level, there's still a disconnect for sure.
You mentioned something really interesting before that I've been churning over in my head. You're pointing out the differences between the Australian market and, well, virtually every other market on the planet, but particularly the US, and how risk averse we are. It's certainly something that I've become more aware of recently, and it is so true. And it's something that I think maybe not enough Australian businesses realize in terms of the effect that when you're working within a market that is naturally risk averse in terms of all the messaging you hear come down the media, whether it's the economy or whatever, it's all bloody doom and gloom and paranoia. The slowness of adopting new technologies, the slowness of it. I mean, how shit our internet is just compared to the rest of the world, everything associated with that. What do you wish more business owners knew about what happens in the US market and about how to get things off the ground in the US market that we could take on board here as people building businesses in Australia?
It does just go back to your point before. It's like brands need to take a risk. And we talk about this internally at the business all the time. There is so much content out there now. There is TikTok, there's podcasting, there is just an oversupply of content. If you're playing it safe as a brand, you're just going to get totally sunk by all the other media and content out there. So you need to have an edge about your content. There needs to be something that stands out. There needs to be some depth around it. So yeah, there's just an incredible amount of content out there. So my advice would be you need to take risks and you need to stand out from the crowd and what everybody else is doing, because otherwise you're just going to be wallpaper for an audience.
I'm like nodding and just, people can't see me do this, but like just nodding like, yes, for goodness sakes, just everything does often come back down to, let me see a direct data point here. Let me see a direct, I invest $300,000 on this campaign or this idea or this whatever. Let me see a direct return on investment in terms of eyeballs or, ear equivalents that I hit, and let me see that it's worth my time and my money and my effort. And it's an argument that, a consultant in this sort of space a little bit with brands building podcasts and, a constant conversation that we're having. It is there is no direct guaranteed return on investment in anything we do in life. Just because we have data available to us in some arenas doesn't mean that that should be always what we look for. Like, when did we lose the ability to take a risk? When did we lose the ability to go on our gut and go, do you know what, this is a ripping idea. Let's just see what happens here. It's a frustrating one.
Those brands are going to get left behind, and like it's going to be much harder and harder to compete with, building a connection and brand loyalty to a younger audience and to Gen Z if you're not taking those risks and you're not speaking their language and authentically. But then also on the flip side, where I think it's going to go and where it's already going is crazy, actually going to be building the brands themselves. And they're going to eat a lot of the breakfasts of the incumbents. I mean, love him or hate him, you look at a creator out of the US called Logan Paul, and KSI launched an energy drink called Prime, valued at $500 million now. Huge drink, and really nipping at the heels of the Gatorades of the world. These creators that have an access to their audience, have brand loyalty, brand love, brand affinity, they're going to be creating products all the time. Emma Chamberlain's another amazing example of her coffee line. Ryan Reynolds, I mean, in some ways a creator, right? Just sold his telco, Mint Mobile, for $2 billion. So the power that a creator has and their ability to access their audience is so unlike how it's been in the past. And the ability for them to build a product, the ease for them, it's much easier. They don't need 20 factories and distribution partners scattered all across the world and logistic partners, etc. It's easy to create. Not easy, nothing's easy, but it's a lot easier than it was to create a product and to sell that product now.
Amen. And as an aside, I feel like there's a takeaway that I have there is, if you have a brand, and you're hiding behind it, maybe consider getting out from behind it. If you've already created the brand and it's a brand that exists and it's falling into all of these systems, maybe consider getting yourself out there and generating a little bit of affinity yourself. You've got my brain ticking over, as creative humans always do. I'll bring us back though to business building, and I want to speak to you about the scale up that you've experienced from somebody looking from the outside into your business, seeing it grow, and that, imagining that whole process of taking on more team members, servicing more clients, taking on more talent, producing more pieces. How have you managed that process?
The talent management side of our business, I don't think it can scale. Like, that's not a scalable business. That is human to human. So we really put a lot of focus on making sure the relationships with talent are the top of the mountain, I suppose. So making sure that they're always cared for, always looked after, we're giving them the right advice, connecting to the right kind of deals. So that's really, really important for us, and something that can't necessarily be scaled. But the other aspects of our business, we are definitely working on building. We've launched over the last 18 to 24 months quite aggressively across Southeast Asia, so Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore. Well, we're getting a much stronger market presence, but absolutely everything comes down to hires, and I've learned that the hard way. But finding the right people for the task, and that just makes your life a lot easier, trying to find smarter people than you to get involved into the business, which isn't hard in my case, but trying to find really, really smart people that are, specialized and have a deep understanding of this creator world has definitely helped the business grow, and we would not be where we are at all without the staff we have now.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I can imagine there's been some scary moments along the way because you don't have a small team. So naturally that means you go through those challenges of seeing what works and what doesn't, and finding the kinds of people that you need to align with.
Yeah, and it's always hard to know if somebody's going to be a cultural fit or they really have the understanding of the business. But yeah, as I said, if you do find those right people, it's just trying to hold on to them, making sure that there's a culture that they feel empowered to take risks, to find solutions by themselves. We're still growing quite aggressively, and there's still a lot of systems and processes that we do not have in the business. So encouraging the staff to help build those systems and processes, but also I've worked in enough kind of big, large media businesses in the past that there's such a layer of politics. Some people spend half their time trying to manage internally, but we want to we want to try and ensure people when they work here, they are empowered to find solutions. They are empowered, as long as they're not losing a lot of money, they can take risks and go after things and find opportunities and take and learn from that too.
That's brilliant, because I think quite often founders, they find themselves there struggling to let go of everything and wanting to be everything to every single step and every single process that exists within the business. So that sounds like a wonderful approach of allowing people to bring a bit of themselves to you.
I definitely feel like, I still want to try and hold on to everything, but team just tell me to go away or shut up. I think they feel confident enough to say that. So I say, okay.
That sounds like a good culture then. You touched on something there and reminded me back of past Tom. So past Tom is expecting his second child, who's going, okay, do I sit here now in a career where I'm employed by somebody else and follow these what sounded like fantastic opportunities, or do I go and I do my own thing? How has that financial risk felt for you along the way, and what have been some of your challenges and learnings throughout it?
Oh my gosh, where do I begin? I mean, yeah, financially, it was such a stupid decision, but naivety is kind of a blessing, I suppose.
I'm trying not to laugh into the microphone because I feel that. So
I moved back to Australia, and then I remember that first year was so tough, having a second child, I think, honestly, I had nothing. I took money out of all our savings, super, etc., to try and get things going. I remember we got down to hopefully my wife is not listening to this, as always saying hey, everything's going to be fine, don't worry. But I think we got down to the last $100 in the bank account, credit cards maxed out. There's a lot of PTSD buried deep inside, and then also 3 mouths to feed. But if you work hard, you focus, what's that saying? necessity is the mother of invention. So you have to find solutions. Otherwise, people aren't gonna be able to eat. So the first few years were definitely hard, definitely made some really stupid financial decisions. But as I said before, maybe it was just an expensive MBA. Where we're at now, things are a little bit more comfortable, but definitely will not rest on my laurels because this world changes so quickly. Things can move so quickly that we have to be on top of it. So trying to make sure we're always staying relevant.
Yeah, it's I love the way that you refer to it as a really expensive MBA, or maybe just the same price as an MBA, let's be honest, because and I think I saw that incredible Harvard business 2 months you can spend, at Harvard and get this incredible business degree. Like, yeah, you can do that, cost you $100,000, but no worries, come and do that. It's like, well, you know what? Perhaps I might just spend that on trying to build a business and I'll learn myself. Hey, how about that?
Yeah. I mean, I was never really that great at school, so I don't think I would survive in an education system. So the best way for me to learn is probably by practice too.
I think it's a great way to be. We should always be forever learners. What is challenging you now at this stage of your business?
I think so. Going back to what you were talking about before with staff, is like, okay, am I managing staff correctly? Because everything is changing so rapidly in our world, and it just, as the years go by, it seems to change faster and faster and faster. Are we making the right decisions? How can we grow organically without overextending ourselves and stretching ourselves too far, but also on the flip side of that, making sure we are pushing ourselves and we are doing everything humanly possible to stay relevant and be part of the cultural zeitgeist and, making sure we're not missing out on the next thing to happen. So those are the kind of things that are keeping me awake at night, and they're the things that have been keeping me awake from night since the day dot when I started the business too.
What are some of your cultural predictions for where the business world might be headed, or perhaps where just generally culture in Australia, when it comes to your perspective on youth, it might be headed?
I think fragmentation, things are just getting more and more fragmented when it comes to interests and communities, etc. So there's a saying you only need 1,000 true fans to survive. I think what we're seeing now is creators in this creator world. It's not, you don't have to necessarily have 1 million, 2 million, 5 million followers to be successful. You can still have a really, really successful media business by having a community of 1,000 to 3,000 people that are willing to spend $5, $10 a month on your podcast or the content that you're creating. So I think we're just going to see more and more fragmentation of media. And then other things, the platforms are just going to get bigger and bigger. Media is just going to get consolidated. More and more media businesses are going to buy other media businesses. In terms of my background, I don't understand the economics of television anymore. If you're not getting commissioned by a Netflix or an Amazon or a Disney, I just don't understand how the Channel 7s and Channel 10s will survive in the next 5 to 10 years. But I said that 10 years ago also, but they're still here and they still seem to be doing well. Yeah, I think from a cultural perspective, we're getting just more and more hyper connected to the world as a whole. So the Australianisms and Australian culture, I think is getting harder and harder to hold on to. And things are kind of morphing more and more into one holistic Western culture. But yeah, everything's going to be interconnected. Culture's going to be interconnected. Culture moves so quickly. A trend blows up on TikTok at 10 p.m. at night, and then everybody's talking about it the next day. So I don't know if that's any kind of crystal clear predictions, but that's what I think is happening more and more.
We've only got probably a few minutes left. So let me ask a selfish question. What are your thoughts on this whole US approach to trying to put a ban on TikTok? And where do you see that going? Because that one blows my mind.
Yeah. Where do I begin? By the time this might come out, there might be some news. I don't know. From a US perspective and a politics perspective, it's political grandstanding by senators. I think we can see a lot of the senators generally have no idea about technology or privacy. So I won't pay too much attention to that. However, something's going to happen. I don't know what it is, but something's going to happen. What I really think the governments should be focusing on is actually making more holistic privacy laws. around how platforms and technology use and manage data, because in the US and Australia, there is really nothing. And it's because, I think what's the average age of a US senator? Something like 69 or something crazy like that. They do not understand that they're so not part of this world that for them to be able to make decisions on it is not good. There really needs to be specialists looking at how platforms handle privacy. So that's kind of really my opinion, is like governments need to be looking at how platforms manage data and how they manage privacy issues as a whole, rather than just putting TikTok as this special case product.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Could I add to that? If you're listening and you're thinking, I don't want to create a TikTok because I'm worried about privacy, for God's sakes, go take it. Just do it. Make a TikTok. We'll leave it. Have fun with the platform. Enjoy it. See what your brand can do on the space. Just for God's sakes, please stop. Stop stopping yourself getting on TikTok. That's a message to myself too. 2 more questions for you. Do you have a dream production in mind that you want to see be brought to life?
If money was no object, to be honest, I've always wanted to make a horror film. Or a thriller. I always wanted, like, how could I make the next Jaws? Very big ambition, but if I was stupidly wealthy and money was no object, I would try and make something that had such an impact on culture like Jaws, and have people screaming and standing out of their seats. I know that's a very old example, but it had such an impact on culture with a very, very simple idea. That's what I would love to do one day.
Oh, brilliant. And just from a brand perspective, there's an idea sitting there that any kind of gutsy brand that can find even the loosest PR campaign to leverage this off of could create something so impactful like that. I would just, love to see those sorts of things being done. I'm a big fan of a brand called Oatly. And they're, oat milk for anybody who doesn't know. And I love them because when they went to go into the podcast space, they didn't make a podcast about oat milk or plant-based foods or, environmental causes around milk or anything like that. They made a podcast about a crime that happened. I think it's in a town called Oatly, or on like a river called Oat. Bloody brilliant. Just make something people want to listen to. And
I do not. I've never heard of that.
I would try and find it.
I need to look that up. That sounds really fascinating.
And so smart. So many great ways to create content that people want to engage with. Find a loose connection to your brand and be able to leverage it into things like social content or PR campaigns and things like that, just to be able to get the sales return you need off of that sort of investment. There's so many great ways to do your marketing differently these days.
Yeah. No, there is. And so many platforms, and like the ability for you to reach an audience is like, you're not renting an audience necessarily like you were 10, 20 years ago on TV, where you have to pay huge amounts for the TVC production and then buy the medium. You can reach it in an organic way too.
Absolutely. And I have every suspicion that you might be able to make that happen. The Jaws of call it 2024 Jaws or whatever it's going to be. I'm very sure that that's going to happen and that your business will continue to grow, because like anything, if you put the right energy behind these things, people catch up and the energy gets behind it. My last question to you is, as you do grow and as you do continue to do the work you do, how can the listener and I support you?
Great question. It's a hard one for me, but let me have a think about this. I guess spread the word. Please follow us at This Is Amplify. Use our creators, email us if you've got any ideas for products, got any ideas for content. Feel free to DM us on Instagram.
Amazing. So I'll make sure I've got all the links naturally in the show notes. So listener, you can go get around the content and learn more about the work that you do as well, and how it can actually help many, many more brands out there think about the way that they're marketing themselves and the way that they're connecting with an audience and the way they're supporting the creator economy. It has been such a pleasure to hear about your business journey. You've been so generous in the realness of what it's like to actually build something. And I'm just so grateful for your time today. So Tom, thank you for spending this time with me.
Thank you so much, Kim. Pleasure.
One quick thing. If you're hearing this, you've listened all the way through. Hopefully that means you really like this podcast, because it's pretty generous to give up 40 odd minutes of your time for it. If that is the case, please leave the show a star rating and a review. It helps me reach so many more people who might also listen all the way through and get some benefit and some support out of it. Not to mention, it puts a real spring in my step to read them. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid. See you there.